wrote this appeal. Our address is 333 Joplin Street. I'm speaking in front of you today based on the appeal. My husband and I recently relocated to Vermillion, and we loved Bliss Point. We bought into the feeling of the development. To us, it spoke family, unity, pride of ownership, and community. However, we, along with many of our neighbors, didn't really understand the intent of this development, and I feel like it was very difficult. You have to know the right people, ask the right questions to really understand all the politics behind it. There's a lot of negative connotations associated with twin homes, especially related to their repetitive nature and lack of curb appeal. It's our opinion that Joplin Street should never have been zoned within Area B, allowing detached dwellings under this conditional use permit. Let me point out that that map that was shown earlier was not available online. We had to ask for it, showing the different zones. So we had no way of knowing, unless we would have come to City Hall to ask for it, which zone we were located within. And that was at the time that we submitted our original appeal letter. Quite blatantly, we were worried about our family's investment and all of our neighbors' investments. While we were reassured that twin homes next door wouldn't affect the assessed value of our home, we strongly feel that it would affect resale. Since writing our original appeal letter, we've learned a lot. The $160 price point discussed in the zoning commission meeting was based on the Bliss Point purchase criteria. We are unaware of this, and even looking back at those meeting minutes now, it's still not clear. The Bliss Point purchase criteria does not allow developers, I repeat, developers, to build spec homes and sell them for more than 115% of Vermillion's median household value. That's where that $160,000 comes in. However, it doesn't say anything about people buying the lot themselves and then contracting out their house to be built. It's just for developers. A new home's value should never be based on the city's inadequate and already depreciating 50-plus-year-old housing supply. The VCDC created this well-intended yet completely unreasonable rule to promote affordable housing, and they alone can change it or grant exceptions. Like I stated previously, we, along with a lot of the neighbors, didn't have a clear understanding of the development, where the zones were located, or the extent to which affordable housing would be pushed. We still feel as though the builder was being dishonest and manipulating private organizational rules to better himself. AMS is manipulating these rules by applying to replat a lot to over 9,000 square feet in order to build his half of the spec home. That way it doesn't fall under that developer regulation that I spoke to earlier. We were unaware of this replatting until we did some digging and asked questions, and feel it was just more abuse of his power and connections. Furthermore, on Wednesday, January 2nd, my husband received an email from AMS stating that, quote, if they were not to build these townhomes, a house worth a much lesser amount would be built there instead, end quote. Here again, he's twisting facts. It's not a black and white issue, as he states. There are ways that a nice single detached home can be built on those lots. Our conditions are still the same. We still ask for the same things, and we feel that it's very important that we have some sort of safeguard on our investment, because it's clear that developers can manipulate the regulations that are already in place. So Jose had already stated what those three are suggested conditions were, and we're definitely open for other safeguards. We just need something to protect our investment, to protect our neighborhood. And then lastly, to address our petition. Since submission, one neighbor did come forward asking for his name to be removed. However, two more came forward and asked to be added. I sent out many emails and personally walked around the neighborhood presenting our concerns and answering questions. Some residents wanted to see our appeal letter, others didn't. In total, 17 Bliss Point residents from 13 different households signed my petition with concerns about building twin homes on Joplin Street. Of the 8 homes that are currently built in Zone B, only 3 people did not sign the petition. And of the 5 homes currently on Joplin Street, only 1 family did not support the petition. You may have the impression that I don't like twin homes. This isn't the case. They have a place and a purpose in every community. I just don't feel like Joplin Street is the right place. If you grant this conditional use permit, please consider putting safeguards in place to protect the adjacent empty lots in our community as a whole. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, there is a question.
I'm sorry. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Do you remember, do the covenants that cover you in Bliss Point describe residential in detail, or is it just one word, residential, and that maybe, did you ever have an idea that it would cover more than just one single-family home?
No, reading the covenants, you wouldn't really, it never says twin homes, it never says duplex, it doesn't say apartments. It talks a lot about the aesthetics of the home and making sure that everything is cohesive and fits together. My husband and I, we had an idea that maybe future development would say have twin homes or, you know, a different style of housing, but we had absolutely no idea that it wouldn't be detached single-family housing within the heart of the development.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on this topic? Yes, please.
I am Alan Madison, and my wife and I, Davita, live at 1301 Rockwell Trail. We live on the same block as where the townhomes or the building for the conditional use permit will be. And we urge you to deny the conditional use permit. We support the appeal. And I'm looking at myself up there, and I'm not doing a very good job. We believe that the conditional use permit violates the covenants. The covenants that, that we signed on to, and that were signed on to in 2014 by Gary Tracy, the board president of the VCDC, in the declaration of number 1, it says that no building shall be erected. This is in Article 1 of the declaration. Blah, 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 blah. No building shall be erected, placed, or permitted to remain on any lot other than a single-family residential structure with an attached garage as specified below. A single-family residential structure means that, the legal definition means that the structure will not accommodate more than one family. And a twin home or a townhome accommodates more than one family. So the conditional use permit clearly violates the covenants. And had we known that there might be a townhome built on our block, and we just moved in, what, a week ago?
No, because we left for a week, so maybe 3 weeks ago is when it was?
Oh, time goes fast. We wouldn't have moved onto the lot. We wouldn't have bought the house. I think that's all I have to say. Any questions?
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this topic? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Carol Gui. My last name's spelled G-E-U, and I live at 1308 Rockwell Trail, which is also in Zone B of the Bliss Point development. First, I would like to say that I fully support my neighbors, Tom and Gina, in their appeal of the Planning Committee's decision. I would like to remind the council that just because an action is legal, it doesn't mean that it is the right thing to do. And I encourage you to carefully consider how you plan growth for Vermillion and all of its citizens. Second, I would like to note a part of the hearing process that surprised me. As you know, part of the hearing process is that citizens are encouraged to go to City Hall and review the documents submitted for the hearing. In order to be an informed citizen, I did this prior to the Planning Commission hearing. The part of the process I was not aware of is the practice that as soon as the citizen leaves City Hall, one of the employees calls the interested parties and reports their interpretation of the conversation. I know this happened in my case because one of those parties contacted me before I even had the chance to get home from City Hall. If this is standard practice, I encourage you to have city employees inform everyone who comes in to look at documents so that they can be prepared to be contacted by those involved in the hearing process. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name's Tom Gouy, GEU, same address as the previous speaker. I just want to note that there have been several lots that have been unbuildable, and we've had to get variances in order to build on those lots. It seems to me that there's been an engineering issue with the platting process that didn't meet the intent of what the developers wanted. Now, there are a couple ways you can fix that. You can fix it by changing or apparently changing the expectations of all the parties, or you can simply cut the 6 lots into 4, making it large enough to have 4 single-family dwellings. There are far less restrictive kinds of remedies that are available in order to keep the nature of this neighborhood the way that I believe that the original developers had intended, and that I believe, whether reasonably or not, many neighbors believed and builders believed that was going to be the case. So thank you very much. I'm certainly willing to answer any questions, though I certainly represent no expertise.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this? Yes, please.
Hello, I am Davita Madison. My husband spoke earlier. We are at 1301 Rockwell Trail. That is my tiny human. So something that I know my husband stated is we would not have, I really wanted to live in Bliss Point for a few reasons. And we wanted to move from where we were living previously. As far as me looking and examining which lots and looking at the covenants, we would not have chosen our lot if we realized it was possible for twin homes to be built there. We would have probably lived in Lot A, since twin homes couldn't be chosen there. But according to the information that we had, at the time, that's what we went with. And I think it's important that, of course, I'm fully supporting the appeal. And if you look at the signatures that she was able to obtain, the majority of the people who live in our section of Bliss Point do not want the townhouse there. And I understand from previous that there are exceptions that can be made to have townhouses in that area. This townhouse should not be the exception. We shouldn't, for the exception, to me, it seems like lots shouldn't have to be replatted, and it shouldn't be in the heart of our community, because I feel like it's setting a horrible precedent, and the rest of Lot B, which ideally would be a residential community of people who are rooted in Vermillion, is going to change. And in 20 years, because we plan on staying there till we retire, they're going to be rentals. That's what's going to happen. And then we're going to be surrounded by rentals. So I do understand that it's like, oh, this is the exception. I'm just concerned about moving forward. And I know that it was stated that our property values aren't going to go down. But if personally, we wouldn't have purchased our house there. I don't see many other individuals being able to willingly purchase their house in a community that could be surrounded by townhomes. So that's not what the purpose was. But yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this topic? Other than
He's a tax guy. Everybody drives.
anyone else wish to speak on this topic?
Can I make one last comment?
Certainly. Is that all right with the council? Okay.
Just the, I know that some people are assuming that this whole thing is lawful, and the covenants are the governing document that we're bound by, that the city is bound by, and sustaining the conditional use permit would be unlawful. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience have a comment or question? Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public portion and turn it to the city council. Tom?
Thank you. I've talked to a lot of people about this over the weekend, and I think there have been issues raised with our planning process and how all of this works. And again, we have a group of people that usually handle our planning and zoning, and they're the Chamber of Commerce and the city engineer and the Planning Commission, which the city engineer is the secretary for, and the developers. And once in a while, we hit a pothole and people show up to our meetings. And that says something to me. Your attendance here says something to me. I don't believe this is just a handful of people. I think you represent your entire neighborhood. And knowing some of you, I know you represent the entire community. So we've got this group of people who are used to working with each other and planning and making these decisions and seeing what can still be legal. And then we have 17 people who live in this area who say no. So I move that we deny the Planning Commission's decision and remand it back to them for further consideration and or amendment. Please, somebody second it so we can discuss it.
There's a lack of a second. Any other comments by the council? Go ahead.
There we go. Either Jose or Nate, I'm sorry I didn't look at this, didn't drive through there. Are there townhomes there now? In any part?
On Joplin? No. There are some on Rockwell, though.
On Rockwell, and that is,
Around the corner.
yeah, around the corner, it's Area B.
Yeah, if I can make this happen. They would be right here. And at the same meeting where these ones were heard, there were some approved for here.
Okay. And the gentleman who mentioned the fact that it said only a single home, is that an Area B that he was talking about, or not?
As far as permitted usage,
No, a gentleman earlier came up and said it's illegal because they're only allowed to have single-unit homes there.
no. There's two different things that we're talking about. We're talking about the city ordinance, which the
Right.
city ordinance has, like I mentioned earlier, splits everything into those 4 different areas. And then you have the covenants. The city is only focusing on the ordinance. That's what we have to follow. We do not have anything to do with the covenants. We have nothing to do with the whatever the criteria as far as building lots or the pricing or anything like that. That's all the VCDC. So when we look at it based on the ordinance, Area A, which would be where most of the houses are already, that's actually only for single-family
Right.
detached homes. Area B then allows us a permitted use, single-family detached homes, and then as a conditional use, you have single-family attached dwellings as
Right.
far as and as well as duplexes and so forth. So essentially, the density of the buildings gets higher and higher as you approach Stanford Street. In the future, if the ordinance that we have right now stays in place, Area C would actually see no single-family detached dwellings, not as a permitted use, not as a conditional use. That is strictly for townhomes, duplexes, and multifamily as a conditional use. So again, this says that the ordinance was approved by the City Planning Commission, by the City Council. We had all the public hearings. The VCDC did a lot of work prior to Nate being on board as the director of the VCDC. So there's been a lot of thought, a lot of meetings regarding this whole development. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say about it.
When Rich is done.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, I don't see anything quote, illegal by anybody, or even trying to be shady, to be honest. But if I understand correctly, the covenants or the development district, that has precedence over whatever else we have, but it's agreed by us after it's written, is that correct?
No, it does, I don't know if it has precedence. We allow the townhomes as a conditional use permit. And then the applicant is also supposed to go and follow the rules that are stated in the covenants. So I don't know if it just places more rules. The covenants do not allow townhomes in the district or in the area. I mean, it has nothing to do with townhomes. It actually just says the way that it needs to be looked at, or, you know, if you have to have landscaping, or if you can park an RV in front of your house, or whatever the case may be. But it doesn't, nowhere in there does it say that you cannot have townhomes anywhere, as far as I'm concerned. And I guess if you have specific questions regarding the covenants, I would bounce that off to Nate.
I do want to talk.
So,
Nate, would you mind, could I ask you a question? And I apologize for not knowing realtors and real estate procedures, but when a house is sold there, it's sold through a realtor or through you? In other words, do the people have an opportunity, and should they know what kind of area they're moving into or purchasing from?
I believe that the first question I can answer a little bit better. In the process, the purchase criteria that's been discussed is basically a guideline from the Vermillion Chamber and Development Company Board of Directors. It basically authorizes and allows staff to be able to act on the process in selling those lots. So in other words, as we all know, or many of us have gone through the process of purchasing a house, purchasing land, selling a house, selling land, different things like that, the negotiated price or the price listed on that might not ultimately end up to that final price that everybody agrees on. Also, there's little things that people negotiate for, negotiate against, different things like that. And so what that purchase criteria allows us to be able to do is basically says, look, here's the intent of what we had in our original plans for that. And I do believe, I think I can speak pretty eloquently and pretty firmly about the original intent and the plans for the development as we've been continually moving them forward. That criteria allows us to be able to say, okay, this falls in line with that original intent and being able to build up this development. So in your question of who we sell it to, we will sell it to either an individual, and in fact, my family would be one of those, as we're residents of Bliss Point ourselves. When we purchase that land from the board of directors, my family, individual, made an offer to buy the land individually. That would be an individual buy. I believe there's a couple other residents throughout the community of Bliss Point who have also made that transaction in that way. Another way that we've done a transaction is when a developer, and a developer is basically considered someone who is buying that land to build up some property on it or some piece of property, and then with the intent of selling that off. If they don't have a buyer in mind, they're buying and building that property speculatively on spec, saying we intend on selling this once we complete that. And that's considered a developer who's going to be able to do that and sell that off. And then finally, the third situation would be a builder who already has the buyer in place, who's going to purchase that land sort of on behalf of their buyer, build that house, and then sell that back to that person who's ultimately going to live there. So we've done a number of transactions. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly how many. We probably are splitting about two-thirds to one-third when it comes to developers to individual homeowners and purchasers.
Does a developer have any more knowledge or information than a regular buyer would have?
I don't think I can speak to that other than the individual person. I think that sometimes more information gets to somebody. They might, depending on who they're trusting, depending on who they're getting information from. I would like to note that the VCDC, we spend a lot of money and a lot of effort in making sure to be available to be able to answer questions. And in fact, it is probably why we have such a good, open, constant dialogue between our city as well as our community. And so we're very more than happy to have an open conversation to be able to have that discussion. I would say that I rarely have had anybody in our office at the VCDC walk out a little bit more confused than they came in. when they ask us questions, as you all know, I'm very capable of talking and probably talking a little bit long. We make sure that we want to inform them. I can't speak to conversations I have not been in. I'm sorry.
understand.
Yep,
Thank you, Nate.
absolutely.
I don't want to take Tom's line here, but I was thinking a little bit about the history of this, and so I did reach out to Steve Howe, because when this original plan came to us in 2012, it was right after we had had a housing study done that basically said that Vermillion doesn't even have a housing market to study. That's what we were told, that they weren't even able to give us an analysis because we didn't have a market to study. And based on that, Steve had come up with this plan for what would ultimately be a mixed-use area that would put a lot of different type of housing onto the market and try and stir the market up. And this was pitched to us on the city council and pitched in a way that we have invested taxpayer money to subsidize these lots and to subsidize this development, with the idea that it would be a lot of different types of housing, and then we would figure out ways to make it work, to fill this in, to make sure that people at all different range of income could be there. And I think, you know, it's upsetting to think that people feel like they didn't have all the information that they needed when they were making a decision. And I think that is difficult to hear, and it's hard to be able to answer that because we don't know all the details of what happened. On the other hand, all of these things that are conditional uses in this area, to me, are sort of a foregone conclusion based on this entire process that we've gone through. You know, if I had my druthers, and I made this clear to Steve at the time, and I've said this to Nate, I would like to see less restrictions. You know, I thought we were going to be able to get governor's homes and habitat homes and tiny homes and, you know, everything there. So the idea that this would be an area that is just for larger homes, I think would go completely against what we were sold and what we told taxpayers. And while we have to be responsible to the people that live out there, ultimately, we have to be responsible for the taxpayer money that we've invested in this area that we promised was for creating affordable homes, affordable housing, mixed use, and a housing market for the whole community. And so that is why I'm going to support the Planning Commission's decision. Talk first and then I'll make
Well,
a motion.
just let me see if there's anyone else first. Anyone else? Then we'll get back to you, Tom.
Yeah, pull it up. Yeah. Pull it towards you.
Okay, so I want to echo some of the things that Tom said and some of the things that Kelsey said as well. First of all, I very much appreciate everyone being here. I really appreciate Tom and Gina putting together this appeal, and I really appreciate all of you coming out here today. And I'm frustrated, as Kelsey said, I'm frustrated with you that you feel that you did not have complete information, particularly on the part of the developers and on the part of those covenants. That said, I think, Tom, what you're saying about listening to these voices, although I agree it's very important, I think it's a logical fallacy to say that we need to listen to these voices when there are voices that are not being heard, because those are potential residents who could be living there, but they cannot speak up. Those people who would be moving into those twin homes or would be moving into those mixed-use areas aren't able to speak up because they are not here yet, right? They don't exist yet. And so I think, as Kelsey said, we need to consider the promises that the council made, and this was prior to my getting here, but we need to commit to those promises to the public good, as we had said initially. I also want to note that these are not exceptions. Although they're called conditional uses, they're not exceptions to the rule, but they are conditional permissions that are placed. And so I also, as a council member for the Northeast Ward, I want to note that it's important that we have mixed use and affordable housing not concentrated in one area. The ward that I live in is very heavily rentals and apartment units, and it would be very important to me to ensure that we have mixed use around the city and that we have affordable housing around the city so that we are not segregating the community. Thank you.
Tom, just a minute. Catherine.
Yes, go ahead.
I just thought everybody should get a turn first. You got it.
Nate, can I ask you another question? Can you address the issue that Alan Madison brought up about the the covenants and exactly what that issue that he read in them cover and what it precludes in relationship? I realize it's a separate process than what we're doing here, but can you talk about how to interpret what he read?
You are asking me to debate a law teacher who I fully respect.
Yes, I am.
About a legal
Please do.
interpretation on a document? Not a chance. I am going to deflect that one to have someone else interpret it, but allow me to be able to answer some questions on that. When it comes to the ordinance, and I believe I've got, I guess, it right here, I really would not be able to speak and advise you on the interpretation of the legality of that. But what I can tell you is we have townhouses out there. We have the ordinance of what Bliss Point is the PDD that Bliss Point is developed in. It allows those townhouses to be able to be built per this process and in that conditional use. That's what I can tell you, and that's really what guides us in our decision making. And I'm sorry I can't answer
Well,
that.
can you clarify what power the covenants have and how they are,
That's for the lawyer.
you know, what real power do they have?
Sure.
The covenants themselves.
Yeah, so the covenants, the best way I can kind of explain them is the covenants is actually owned by the owners of the property. And right now, the VCDC, depending on a couple sales coming in and out, basically owns a little bit over 50% of the property of Bliss Point. And so the VCDC as an owner of the property, in the covenants, if I can get a little picture, the covenants basically cover all of the developed lots. And when I say developed, that means utilities are in there and they're ready to be built on. These are shovel-ready house lots. That's what the covenant surrounds. And so everybody who owns property is basically a part of that covenant. They have the ability to be able to basically say, hey, you're in or out of the covenants. In fact, I think I even, because of a broken foot and some cold winter, it took me a while to get my lights off of there. Technically, that would have been a challenge to make sure to abide by those covenants. Those covenants direct the property owners of Bliss Point. When it comes to the authority or kind of the process in there, there's an architectural review committee that at the purchase of those lots, before the house is going to be built, that design of those houses is submitted to the architectural review committee, and that committee is growing as basically the population diversifies with the ownership. So in other words, again, the VCDC owns a little bit over 50% of the property in the covenants, so the VCDC has a good amount of representation on there. There's also Bliss Point neighbors on there as well, starting to represent that neighborhood as the neighborhood starts to grow. And so in that process, the house designs are presented to the architectural review committee. The review committee then signs off on that, approves, maybe requests a couple changes, whatever it might be, to be able to kind of go along with those covenants and to be able to have a design that fits within the neighborhood. And then that basically frees up the process where the city can then issue a building permit to be able to allow them to be able to build. So when it comes to the strength of the covenants, it really just keeps them from adding that building permit until it's been approved by the architectural review committee.
So where is the conditional use permit in that process of being seen by the committee?
Sure. So that would actually be basically a kind of a sub-lane of that. A conditional use permit would not tie directly with those covenants. The conditional use permit has to do with the zoning, and the zoning is in that design part. So if a house wanted to be built that went along with the certain zoning style that it was, that's when it may ask for a conditional use permit. And in this situation right here is then when it would ask for a conditional use permit. Same type of thing, you wouldn't be able to get your building permit until the conditional use permit was granted.
So this development that the conditional use permit is for hasn't been seen by this committee yet?
No, it has been seen and it's been approved by this committee. The Architectural Review Committee has approved the plans for these townhouses to be built on these lots. They have seen it and have fully approved it. And then that is then in the process, that's then when it goes to the Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission approved it, and then it came to you.
So are you on that committee?
I do represent on that committee. I represent in a couple different hats, again, as a resident of Bliss Point, and then also in my position with the VCDC.
So I'm sort of getting back to what I asked you originally was, so the element that Alan Madison brought forward as part of the covenants would have, I assume, been a discussion in this committee meeting. Can you speak to that?
I can only speak that there was no objection to it.
I'd like to ask Jim if he can clarify for us.
Those covenants are restrictive covenants. They're governed by statute. If the covenants are contained, are within a governed property that are within the city limits, they're good for 25 years. They can be renewed. They can be amended. There's methods that are specified in the statutes to do that. They're enforceable either by the city if it's within the city limits or by private landowners, and they do not trump the zoning laws of a city. If there's a conflict between the two, then the zoning ordinances prevail. And I think that's what was brought up by Mr. Mattson, is that he is saying that there's a conflict between the restrictive covenants that have been drafted governing that area and what the zoning ordinance states. I don't know that there really is. I was listening hard when he quoted it, but it went fast and I didn't hear it all, but it sounded like what the section that he quoted said was that only one single-family structure can be erected on a given lot. Is that what it says? Yes. And when you look at the definition of a townhouse, it's a, in the zoning ordinance, it's a single structure that's attached. In other words, it has they share an exterior wall, but each single family that lives in that structure has to live on separate lots, meaning that the wall that they share is going to be on a lot line, which means that then each structure, each family dwelling on each side of that shared wall, according to the definition, has to be on a separate lot. And that's what's happening in this case. And so my thinking on it is that the townhouse authority for a conditional use permit is in line with what the restrictive covenant says, because each single family dwelling, there's only going to be one of them on each lot. And the even though it's one structure with a shared wall, each half of that structure has to be owned separately.
Thank you. Steve, you had a question? Okay. Anyone else?
I'm happy to read the language again if you'd like.
Just sure.
I'd like to hear it.
Yeah.
The language is, no building shall be erected, placed, or permitted to remain on any lot other than a single-family residential structure.
Which section? Like, this is the.
Article 1.
I'm just going to give it to.
No lot. Excuse me, wait, excuse me. No building shall be erected.
I have it.
And
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you. Jim?
so then, the definition of a dwelling, single-family attached townhouse, a single-family dwelling owned separately and attached to two or more single-family dwellings by vertical walls. Each dwelling shall be in its own lot.
Thank you. Tom?
I'll allow another comment.
That's up to the council, please.
Yeah, well, I'm for it.
Okay, that's fine.
Again, Carol Gouy. I'm a little concerned about a couple of the comments that have been made about why we are here. And maybe you don't completely understand the townhomes that are being built. The price that they plan to sell those for is between $275,000 and $280,000. I do not consider that to be affordable housing. I would prefer to see single-family homes put on those lots that would sell for less than that. When we bought our lot, knowing where it was located within Bliss Point, we were very conscious of keeping our house within a very specific price point so that hopefully in the future it would be affordable for someone in Vermillion. But I do not consider a $275,000 townhome to be affordable, and I think that maybe you've misunderstood or have wrongly characterized my concerns about the addition, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to clarify that that was not my driving factor, which a couple of you had kind of indicated that you thought it was.
Thank you. Further, Jim?
In looking at this definition here, it says, no building shall be erected, placed, or permitted to remain on any lot other than a single-family residential structure with an attached garage, as specified below in Article 4. And in our packet, we had a diagram, or not a diagram, but a rendering of what these were going to look like, and each one does have an attached garage. So I guess my belief is, based on what I'm reading here, is that this restrictive covenant and our conditional use provision in the zoning ordinance can coexist.
Okay. Further discussion? Tom?
Thank you. I appreciate having a second turn. The concerns I've heard from, not only from the people here, but from others, is that the covenants, as an example, even though city ordinance may override them, is that it says residential. It says other than a single-family residential structure with an attached garage, as explained later. But nowhere in there does it say, in parentheses or otherwise, this includes attached residences, townhomes, duplexes, whatever term you want to use. And I agree with Commissioner Munster, we need to start using similar terms, but because that started confusion right away. This is about money. When people get together and they want to plan and they meet with the developers, yes, we want to develop, yes, we want a variety, but it seems like we always end up with who's going to make the most off of this, as terms of maybe a developer goes. Yes, I know that it's a free market economy and all this, but stop to think about that versus, that group of people working against 17 people who signed a petition. There are other options, as was mentioned, and I'll finish here. Bliss Point has plenty of areas to put townhomes, attached homes, whatever you want to call them, down in other areas, perhaps along Stanford. I mean, they should be included as part of the variety. The other option might be to put in another street in behind and put the townhouses in the backyards across the street from the houses on Joplin to help solve this. There are lots of other options we could use. Yes, a conditional use permit is an option, but I don't think it's right in this case the way this kind of just happened. I'm all for the amendments, but I think we should have the Planning Commission look at those and study those and make some other decisions, and maybe they'll come up with something else rather than us try to amend it tonight or just let it fly the way it is. So I'm against maintaining the commission's decision.
Clarification, as I understood, that along Stanford is not possible for single dwellings. Well, I just want to clarify that it isn't possible to put them in area C. That would be just, yeah, change the thing. Jack? Yes, Steve?
I'm going to move that we reject the appeal and support the Planning Commission's decision. I do appreciate people coming out tonight, and I am sympathetic to your argument. You know, having you read the covenant, I understand exactly your argument, and it does seem like a technicality of this particular definition that's being built. However, I do also understand that this is a more affordable way to build homes in that area. You know, Carol talked about the cost of that home, that two home, but it would be cut in half. That cost would be cut in half because there'd be two different. That's per side. Okay. Is that correct?
Per side.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. So, in other words, it would be a house that would be of similar vein of those houses that are out there in cost, so it would not impact the overall level of housing out there. So, but more importantly, I am interested in having the original idea of the Bliss Point be maintained, in that there be a mix of housing out there, and this is one way to include a mixed housing option. And so I'm
That's the end of your motion. I'll second it. Are you done?
His motion is to deny
Okay.
the appeal.
You just said to deny
Right.
And you're seconding that?
And I'll second that. I didn't know you were going to go into a long explanation. I'm sorry. I apologize.
According to the way the ordinance reads, you're supposed to vote either to uphold, to overrule, or to amend. And so whatever your motion is going to be, it should be either to uphold, to overrule, or to amend.
the Planning Commission's decision.
Yes.
So I would move to uphold the Planning Commission's
Well,
resolution.
I won't second that.
That's what I thought, okay.
Sorry, you already? No. For clarification, Jim, the way Steve has moved and it has been seconded, it would deny the appeal, or how did you word that?
It would uphold the Planning Commission's.
Uphold the planning commission.
Commission's,
Okay. Just so everyone's clear on.
decision.
Okay, are you ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Oppose?
Aye.
Rule that did carry. Okay. We have no old business this evening, so we'll turn to the new business. Item A, a resolution and statement of municipal electric utilities benefits. And John, please.
Excuse me, thank you. Currently, as the city expands, if you will, annexes additional property, by state statute that's been around for about 40 years, the city does have the ability to annex the existing electrical service territory from that provider into the city's electrical service territory. In December, there's representatives from Clay Union Electric and East River who met with the city, who visited with us and said that they were going to be dropping a bill or bills to limit the city's ability to expand our electric service territory as new ground is annexed by the city of Vermillion. As I referenced, their bill would basically to freeze the service territory. This would continue to split our residents in terms of, or provide for more splits. Residents may not know or who their electric provider would be. I'm living in the city, but I'm served by rural electric. Sometimes that can create confusion for new residents of our community. The city, as was referenced a little bit ago, does make a substantial investment in developing these new areas. And so as we have new residents come in, they should have the same benefits, costs, and opportunities as other members of the municipality. And so the attached resolution provides an opportunity for the city council to request our local District 17 delegation maintain the current state statutes that we have with regard to electric service territory.
Thank you, John. Council, any comments, questions for this? I can only speak anecdotally that I live in an area that I'm in the city limits, but I pay REA rates, higher rates than what the city residents pay. Motion and a second to approve the resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item B, resolution adopting guidelines and general aesthetic standards for small cell telecommunications infrastructure. Are you going to read the whole?
No, I won't read it to you. This has been a developing issue over the last year. In September, the FCC had a declaratory ruling which kind of, for the most part, was focused primarily on fees that municipal governments or local governments, state governments might charge. And then they also had what was called a third report and order on wireless infrastructure that also came out in September. In December, they denied the petition to stay that declaratory ruling in the third report and order. And so what that did is it basically preempted a lot of local control with respect to wireless communications, the infrastructure in particular, not the way that they're operated. But what they did provide was a couple opportunities. One is that we could have some general aesthetic standards. That was an issue in some places in the country with how specific those aesthetic standards were. It was recommended that you as a local governing body could adopt some very general aesthetic standards, so as long as they were not discriminatory. As long as you have those adopted by mid-January, you can continue to refine those or change those until mid-April, at which time they would need to be finalized, mid-April of this year. As well as, we just received it last week, a model ordinance the municipal league has been working on, and I know you appreciated getting the 17-page ordinance to read through. Don't worry, we're going to have a noon session where we try to break that down into some bites to take a look at and to understand that, and we'll have that before the council to consider during the first quarter of this year. I would note that the resolution does have some general aesthetic standards provided for in it. It uses terms quite frequently like blend in, minimize adverse visual impacts, be compatible with. Really, basically, what I'd say the message is that those new items that would be built would need to blend in and make look like they fit with the neighborhood that's there, the built neighborhood that's there. So we'd recommend adoption of these general aesthetic standards for small cell telecommunications infrastructure, and certainly point out that we can customize those so long as they are not picking any particular entity over the course of the next couple months, but this would help us meet that threshold that the FCC had placed out there.
When you have a chance to read it, please note that a lot of the discussion is about right-of-way. And currently, the cities and communities have jurisdiction over the right-of-ways because of, I think, federal law. And telecommunications, or the communication board, I think is trying to usurp that and take away our rights. And so part of this is coming back in this 17-page deal from lawyers to try and protect some of our territories with things like, if it's in a right-of-way and they quit using it, they have to take it out if they quit using the structures and so on. It's their responsibility. If damage occurs, like they put stuff on a pole that isn't built to hold it, it's their responsibility to maintain stuff like that. So when you have a chance, are you going to send it out, the whole thing, or?
Yeah, Friday.
Okay, so do read about some of that stuff. Are there further comments or questions you want for John on this? Would you want to make a motion? Yes, exactly. We have to do something by next week, or we don't have a say.
So I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, John. Item C, request to close Kidder Street from Court Street West to the alley between Court Street and Market Street on Saturday, September 23rd, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. for Special Olympics polar plunge. James?
Thank you.
The
The law enforcement torch run and Special Olympics of South Dakota are requesting the closure of Kidder Street from Court Street west of the alley between Court and Market on Saturday, February 23rd, 2019, from 11 to 6. The past couple years, this event was held on the half block of Court Street from Kidder Street north to the alley between Kidder Street and Main Street. This request would return it to its location from 2015 and 2016. John Cole, representing the law enforcement torch run, completed this request. The closure will begin around 11 a.m. on the 23rd. The plunge will take place around 3 p.m. and is expected to be over around 4 p.m. The request allows for 4 hours for setup, the event itself, and then 2 hours for the teardown. John Cole has indicated they will be using a sound system, but they are not expected to exceed any noise levels as the event is during the day. I will note that Street Superintendent Pete John has been notified regarding the street closure, and essentially because it is just the portion of the street that is from Kidder to Court to the alley, no downtown businesses will be affected by this closure. Insurance for the event is paid for by Special Olympics South Dakota, and copies of that can be presented upon request. And financial consideration would just be the city workers assisting with the barricades, and administration recommends that the council approve the temporary closing for the polar plunge.
Thank you, James. Council?
I move approval of temporary closing of Kidder Street for the Special Olympics event.
A motion and a second to approve the street closure. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item D, airport lease agreement with Mr. Robert Grossman and Jose, please.
Thank you. In May 2001, the city and Mr. Grossman assumed a lease agreement entered between the city and Mr. William Mount. The original agreement was signed in December 1998. This agreement was for 20 years and had one option to renew for another 20 years. The lease agreement for the first 20 years expired on December 7th of 2018. The city never received a request from Mr. Grossman for an extension or an option to exercise additional 20 years. Due to no requests to exercise being received, the city drafted a new agreement with the owner. The owner has agreed to sign the agreement with the city. The new agreement will be strictly for the land for the lease of the land where the hangar is. The land use is a parcel roughly 50 feet by 60 feet, and there's a hangar 36 feet by 42 feet located within this parcel. This new agreement will be for a 10-year period commencing on December 7th, 2018, with a 10-year option to renew after the first 10-year period. Based on the current lease agreement or lease rates, the amount that the owner would pay on an annual basis would be $224.40. This is an increase from the previous yearly amount of $151.20. The new lease agreement would be for, as I mentioned, $224.40 per year. This is calculated based on a 5 cents per square foot for the building size plus 10 cents per square foot for the unused land within the lot. Administration recommends approval of the airport hangar lease assignment with Mr. Robert Grossman.
Jose, could I just ask a question? I may not have read it carefully enough. Item 15, it says snow removal is responsibility of the owner. Is there any mowing requirement?
I guess as far as I know, the city mows a lot of those open spaces, so it might actually be something that our airport manager might gingerly get as close as he can. I think some of the property owners or some of the hangar owners actually have their own mowers, and they may mow directly next to the hangar, but for the majority, I think the city takes care of it as a neighborly gesture.
Thank you. Jim?
Jose, I had one question here about number 13. In that provision, it says that the hangar will become the property of the city unless the owner removes it within 60 days. Is that what it's intended to mean?
Yes.
So when you get to that last expression there, unless not removed, shouldn't it say unless removed?
Yeah.
It'd be the same thing in Denny and Brenda Martin's lease that's coming up next.
Okay.
Does that seem right?
Yeah.
So take the word not out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good catch. Further discussion from the council? The question?
Oh, I just have a quick question, if you will. First of all, I think it's nice that we contacted them since they didn't contact us about their lease ending. So, on the other hand, then, is there any other interest that's ever been expressed in these by people who maybe they don't know when to watch when someone's lease is up? But is there any other interest expressed out there for a hangar lot?
We do have periodically, maybe once a year, we do have individuals, I guess, that either contact Denny or contact me directly, asking if there's any lots available to build hangars. And after conversations with them, it never goes any further than just general inquiry.
So we just have the two?
No, we have more hangars there, but as far as
Those are the two that
requests,
are up.
and those are it, yeah.
Thank you.
Be nice if somebody would, motion and approval. A second to, with the not out. Okay, and the adjustment, okay. Motion and second to approve the airport lease agreement with Mr. Robert Grossman. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, Jose, if you go to the Martins.
Yep, so again, this is the same agreement, or different agreement, same time period. On July 6, 1998, Mr. Dennis Martins and Ms. Brenda Martins, the owners, entered into a lease agreement with the city directly, so they did not take a different lease to construct a hangar. This agreement, again, was for a 20-year period and had one option to renew after another 20 years. The first 20 years was to expire July 6, 1998. Again, we did not receive a request to exercise that option for another 20 years, so the city drafted a new agreement and contacted the owners regarding that. The owners have already signed the agreement with the city. This agreement would be strictly for the lease of the land. The land use is a parcel roughly 50 feet by 55 feet, with the hangar in it that's 40 feet by 42 feet. The new agreement, similar to the previous one, is going to be for 10 years, commencing on July 6, 1998, with a 10-year option to renew after the first 10-year period is over. Based on the current lease rates, the amount that the owner would pay yearly would be $191. This is a significant increase from the previous amount, which was $10. The new lease agreement would be for, as I mentioned, $191 per year. Similar to the previous one, this is calculated for 5 cents per square foot for the building size, plus 10 cents per square foot for the unused land. Administration recommends approval of the airport hangar lease assignment with Mr. Dennis Martins and Brenda Martins.
Can they provide their own electricity, or
No, the city provides electricity.
to the hangars?
Yep.
Council? Motion and a second to approve the airport lease agreement.
Yep.
I'm sorry, we had the correction on the previous one, too. Yeah, that's right, thank you. Motion and a second to approve the airport lease agreement with Mr. Dennis Martins and Mrs. Brenda Martins with the condition of the removal of the word "not" in Part 13. All in favor, we got that, right? We're done with that. Oh, we had a vote, a second, all in favor? Aye. Against? Approved, thank you. All right, item F, resolution authorizing the purchase of a light and power boring machine.
Okay, the budget session in August 2018, the city council budgeted for the purchase of a boring machine for the light and power department. In 2019, the boring machine is used by several departments to complete city projects, whether it's light and power boring conduit or light and power boring for the water department when we install water mains. Administration would like to take advantage of an attractive bid by Sourcewell, which is, they used to be National Joint Powers or NJPA bid. The city received 2 bids, one from Vermeer High Plains from T for a 2019 Vermeer D20X22 Series 3 Navigator with additional rods and a trailer for $118,181.96. This bid also included a trade-in value for the city's existing 2009 Vermeer D16X22 Navigator boring machine, rods and trailer of $69,000. The second bid received was by the city was from Ditch Witch of South Dakota, from Sioux Falls. This was for a similar machine or piece of equipment with rods and a trailer. Their bid was for $141,258.90. The bid also included a trade-in for the city's existing 2009 boring machine and the rods and trailer for $40,000. The equipment replacement fund has $197,000 for the purchase of a boring machine and the rods and trailer. The savings will remain in the fund and be used to the purchase of other equipment. Staff estimates that selling the city's boring machine or trading in the boring machine with rods and trailer would only bring around $55,000. This makes a trade-in offer of $69,000 very lucrative. Administration recommends approving the resolution to purchase a 2019 Vermeer D20X22 Series 3 Navigator with additional rods, trailer, and trading in the city's 2009 Vermeer D16X22 Navigator boring machine, rods, and trailer to Vermeer High Plains for a net price of $118,181.96 and allowing the city manager or the city's finance officer to sign the purchase agreement.
Thanks, Jose. Council? Motion and second to approve the resolution authorizing the purchase of a light and power department boring machine. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thanks, Jose. Item G is the 2019 payroll resolution. John, you going to read it all? Or?
Sure, afterwards, if anybody wants to, I'll go line by line. But so annually, what the City Council has done to meet state statute, and the state statute requires the annual publication of a complete list of salaries of officers and employees of the city. And so annually, at the first meeting of the year, the City Council has adopted a resolution which provides that information. It's published as part of the minutes and also published in the paper, which helps us meet the state requirement. And then during the course of the year, there is changes, new employees are added, change in wage due to a promotion or a step increase, something like that. It is included with the minutes, so that it is reported during the year as well. So generally speaking, there's per the union agreements that you saw in November and December of last year, there is a 2 and 2.5% cost of living adjustment that has been applied for our union and covered employees as well as our non-union employees as well as council members. So then I would also note that with the change in our minimum wage here in South Dakota as of January 1st, we made sure that all of our employees were making at least minimum wage, which generally tends to be our seasonal employees. We believe, we know there's sufficient funding in the budget to provide for these wage increases as stated, and we recommend approval of the resolution to authorize the publication of the salaries to comply with state statute.
Thank you, John. Council?
I just have a question.
Certainly.
I kind of looked for alphabetical order at first, but the airport's not on here. Is the $800 and some we pay periodically, where it says maintenance, is that not salary?
He's not considered an employee, but an independent contractor.
With that, do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the 2019 payroll resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Bid openings, fuel quotes, Mike.
The fuel quotes should be laying on the table here, hopefully. I could not get the file put in the folder for Don to put on the screen, so That's where I was running around beforehand. The quotes refer to that January purchase of fuel, item 1, unleaded gasoline, 10% ethanol. First quote's from Stern Oil, $1.87.32 cents. Item 2 is number 1 and number 2 diesel fuel dyed. The blended cost is $2.09.515 cents per gallon. Item 3 is number 1 and number 2 diesel fuel clear. The blended cost is $2.39.515 cents. Second quote was from Brunick Service, and item 1, $1.80. Item 2, $2.14. Item 3, $2.41. Brunick's is low on 1, Stern Oil's low on 2 and 3.
Motion and a second to approve low bids. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item is City Manager report. John, please.
Just a couple reminders. One is that the next City Council meeting is on Monday, January 21st. Some government offices are closed that day with the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, but the City Council does have a meeting on that Monday, January 21st. The Planning Commission has a meeting next Monday night, January 14th at 5:30. One item on their agenda is the rezoning of a lot at the southeast corner of North Crawford Road and East Cherry Street, and the rezoning request is from general business to R2. This is the last week for you to surrender your real Christmas tree, I guess. The site is open through this Friday, January 11th, and the site is located in the same place it has been in past years, which is on the south side of Broadway Street, just west of Dakota Street. Again, we ask that you remove any plastic you might wrap the tree in to transport, as well as lights or other decorations that might be on that tree. Again, it's for real Christmas trees through this Friday, January 11th. ICAP, Integrated Community Action Plan, that group, which is comprised of the city, the county, chamber, school district, and the university, they will be having a public meeting on Monday, January 28th, and that'll be at 7 p.m. here in the city council chambers. They will be presenting the results of the feasibility study of a community center that they did or completed last year. And as I noted earlier, the City Council, you did receive a copy of that draft of the Small Cell Telecommunications Ordinance, and we'll be working to bring that to you here at an upcoming meeting to walk through it and also to bring it forward to you to consider for action. I'll probably be completing that during the first quarter of this year.
Thank you, John. Any comments or questions for our city manager? Okay, seeing none, then we'll turn to Stump Mike on invoices payable. He always looks forward to that, I'm sure.
Move to pay our bills.
Motion and second to pay our bills. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 12, consensus agenda. We have one item, set a public hearing date of January 21st, 2019 for a special daily wine license for the Vermillion Cultural Association on or about February 16th, 2019 at 4 West Main Street, which is the Vermillion Theater, for a special event.
Approval of the consensus agenda.
Second?
A motion and a second to approve the consensus agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Almost didn't hear you, Steve.